Thank you, dear. You guys can have a seat. Well, I want to thank all of you guys for coming over today for my speech. Today I'm going to be talking about pennies and why pennies don't make sense. Now, I'm going to speak briefly about 3 points: the history of pennies, the value of pennies, and their worth. I'm going to hit on all 3 points really to give you the idea on why pennies are not valuable to our currency any longer and why we should eliminate them completely from our U.S. currency. So, on average, it now costs the U.S. government 2.41 cents to make 1 penny. So we're losing net a penny and a half almost for making 1 penny. That just doesn't make any sense. We're creating currency that actually puts us in the negative from the get-go. So just making them causes us to lose money. And because most Americans lose them, we are producing 4 to 6 billion pennies a year. Now that's a lot of money. If you think of 6 billion pennies a year and how it accumulates over the years, we're losing a lot of money in the U.S. just simply by making the penny. So from the get-go, we're already putting ourselves in the negative. Now, I'm going to start on my first point, how pennies were first introduced. Pennies were introduced first in the 7th century in England, and they were the value of 1 cent, although 1 cent bought you a lot at that time. Pennies were made so because what they were doing with the current shillings is they were cutting them in half and they were dividing them every time they got to smaller denominations. Ever since then, the penny was made of full 100% copper. The United States started with the penny in 1793 and also made the penny copper. Now, as the price of copper started rising, so did the cost of making the penny. Ever since then, they started reducing how much copper is in the penny, starting from 1793. Now, moving to my second point, which is what is the value of the penny. Let's talk about how the penny progressed. From 1793 to 1942, the penny was 100% copper and started decreasing slowly. At 1942, the penny was about 20% copper now and 80% zinc. In World War II, in the year 1943, the United States eliminated almost completely the copper out of the penny because they were using the copper for bullets and they were using it for weapons in the war. So they pulled all this copper they were using for the currency on the penny and they started using it for war efforts. Back the next year, they figured out that copper is very expensive, so they switched to making the penny fully of zinc and just coating it with copper. That is the year we probably should have gotten rid of the penny, when we realized that it wasn't cost effective to continue to make it. The United States did get rid of the 2 cent. None of you know it because it's before your time, but there was a coin that was for 2 pennies, or 2 cents. They got rid of it because they said that the value of the metal was no longer any good for what it was worth in the market. That was a great idea. Now we have an even smaller currency, and the ratio between what it's worth and what the metal is worth is over 10 times. So you're looking at something that is worthless, it's not even worth its own weight. Now, moving on from the value of penny, let's talk about the worth and why the penny is still around. So we have England, Canada, Ireland, Australia, and over 7 other countries around the world who are pushing to get the penny eliminated. It's been voted many times in the U.S. and it has failed on why the penny should continue or not. So you might say it makes sense to get rid of the penny, so why is the penny still around? Well, as you know, our voting system works on special interests. So the more money you have to invest against whatever agenda you're moving, the more successful you are. You have 2 things behind the penny: zinc companies. Zinc companies are behind the penny. Guess why? They provide the government with the metals to make the penny, and their profits are in the billions of dollars. It is not, if the penny were to go out of service, so would all those zinc companies. They provide the metals, they want it to be around. They don't care if it's profitable or not, it's profitable to them. Second, there's a very noble cause, but charities. Some charities push to receive pennies, and since most Americans care nothing about the pennies, they give pennies to charities without thinking it twice. So there are some charities that are profiting of receiving these pennies, and they want to continue that trend. Now, currently, Canada is going to vote this year on whether they're going to keep the penny or not. If they don't, they're going to go. If they eliminate the penny completely, they're going to go to a rounding system. Now, the rounding system means everything's going to go to 5 cents. So instead of being 1 or 2 pennies, if the price is going to be rounded up or down. Depending on how that goes, it can go to the nearest nickel at all times. So, we still, in my opinion, should move forward with eliminating the penny, because just in manufacturing this penny is causing us a net loss. And all those net losses and all those budget deficits that we create, we still pay back in taxes. So yes, and the rounding system might cause some shortages, but we are causing shortages on money from the get-go. So the currency that we have in our market is made to facilitate transactions, make it easier for us to buy and sell things. Well, on average, pennies add an additional 40 seconds to every transaction across the United States. That is, every time that it comes down to paying with pennies, it injects more time into the work area, both with cashiers and people paying in currency, whenever they have to go in and dig pennies and pull pennies out of the purse and pay or sell any items. The pennies are lost on average from a year or 2 years, when they're made to last from 25 to 30 years. We make these things to last, but for some reason they either end up lost in people's couches, at the bottom of their cars, in vacuums, and just discarded. One of our economists said that once you start leaving currency at the counter, it is no longer valuable to our market. And that's exactly what happens with pennies. In conclusion of my speech, I want to say that there are disadvantages and advantages on both sides on whether we should keep the penny or not. But think of the last time that you actually were looking around your house trying to desperately find that penny that you lost. And think of the actual value that it gives to you when you actually find the penny on the street. Most people now see a penny on the street and they don't even bother to stop to pick it up. That wasn't the case 150 years ago when it was started. It is the case now. Inflation has completely killed the value of the penny, and there's no point in continuing to manufacture. So, now I've reached the end of my speech, and I'm opening the floor up for any questions that you may have.
Do you think that they'll get rid of the nickel eventually, since the penny's the lowest, so then the nickel would be the second lowest?
Most people say that we are moving towards eventually either not dealing with currency at all, or having only major denominations. It is on average, and it was part of my speech, on average, 90% of all transactions do not even deal with currency any longer. Think of how you get paid. You get paid by direct deposit, and in turn, think of how you pay the people that you owe money to. You rarely deal with cash. And more and more technology is injected to just not touching currency any longer. So even though less people deal with cash, I think that eventually the nickel will be done with, but so far the nickel is profitable for us.
You say Canada is voting on getting rid of the penny. Have you heard anything about the United States already trying to go that route, or is it that real?
Well, Canada will be voting this year to get rid of the penny. The United States has been pushing the same, but the way that our politics work, everything is pushed by special interests. So basically, these sink companies that inject millions of dollars to getting officials elected, those officials in turn are always going to look back at the interest of the companies, not really the interest of anyone else. Because when it comes down to it, those companies put them there. But legislation will be moved forward. Mostly what they're going to do is see how it works out for them and their impact, and then they'll probably do the same over here. Any additional questions? Okay.
Back to the answer you gave me. If they're doing away with, like, they pay you with direct deposit and you don't handle cash or nothing like that, then don't you think that they'll just do everything electronically and just do away with cash eventually?
I think they would. I think we're far away from that, because currently our population, the ones that are lower income or the people that are struggling the most in the economy, they still all deal with cash. So if we were to get rid of the circulation of cash altogether, I think we would hurt those companies that either deal with a lot of cash, or the low income workers that they don't get paid direct deposit, that don't have checking accounts. But I thank you for all your questions, and thank you for coming for my speech.